welcome to First Strike right here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we are going to break down everything going on in the UFC and also some Bellator action this weekend that we have to get to. Now, I can't do it by myself, so I've got a cast of thousands to help me get through this next hour with expertise from Nick Kalikas, who sets the lines right here at Circa. Lou Finocchiaro is going to join us as well. He was at the weigh-ins on Friday. He'll give us the latest from what he's seen from those fighters. Reed Kuhn, a professional capper, is going to join the program alongside Jordan Sherwood also. So these guys will give their expertise in the MMA world and try to make you some money before this weekend. Let's talk about First Strike 195. It's at UFC Apex right here in Las Vegas on Saturday night. And the main card is very, very interesting. Again, the ladies take center stage like they did a week ago with Mackenzie Dern losing to Marina Rodriguez. This week, we've got Aspen Ladd taking on Norma Dumont. This fight is up at 145 pounds. And what intrigues me about this, you see that Ladd right now is a small favorite at minus 125 against the challenger here, and Dumont at plus 105 here. The winner of this fight could be in line to fight for the belt at 145 pounds against Amanda Nunes because they're always looking for new opponents from the Lioness, and right now it's a thin world out there, so the winner of this one at 145 might get that nod. We are expecting this one to go deep into the Vegas night with the over-under set at 4.5 rounds, expecting that fight to go over. That is plus money at plus 100. The under, if you want to go for a stoppage here, would happen at minus 130 if you want to go that route. Now, on the co-main event, we've got the ageless wonder himself, Andrei Orlovsky, of course, the former UFC heavyweight champion of the world, taking on a young guy. Everybody's young to Orlovsky these days in Carlos Felipe. Basically even money you're seeing here, about minus 115 for the old former champ against the newcomer here, the Brazilian in Felipe. The over-unders here for a 3-round fight set at 2.5 and juiced heavily to the over at minus 210. And again, if you want to take the under there, it is plus 165 on the takeback. So the old against the new, we'll talk about these fights in more detail coming up in the next hour. But one other on the undercard I want to point out to you, Lupe Godinez is taking on Luana Carolina. And what's interesting about this for Godinez is she's attempting to set a record in the UFC. If the name sounds familiar, she just fought last week. Yes, 7 days ago at UFC Fight Night 134. And now she's going to move up to 125 pounds to take on Carolina in this one. And if she gets the win, which she is expected to do at minus 250, she'll set a record for the quickest turnaround in the history of the UFC to win 2 fights just 7 days apart. So we're going to talk about that one in greater detail as well. But also, I mentioned that Bellator has got a couple of intriguing fights here with some names you know certainly from the UFC. We're talking about Ryan Bader against Corey Anderson in this one. And right now, the odds have been set for Bader, the former challenger in the light heavyweight division in the UFC, who's held some belts here in Bellator, at plus 160. In Anderson, again, a guy that was fast-tracked at the light heavyweight division in the UFC, didn't work out as well so far. 2-0 in his Bellator accomplishments here, has not lost, undefeated in Bellator. He's the solid favorite at minus 190. The over-under in this 5-round bout is right now placed at 3.5, with the over taking some juice here at minus 130. So we'll keep an eye on that fight as well. And also Benson Smooth Henderson going to take on Brent Primus. A very intriguing bout here. Of course, Benson, a former UFC champ. Primus, a former Bellator champ. So it's champ against champ here. And right now you see that Henderson is the small betting favorite at minus 130. Primus plus 110. And again, this one over under right there, smack in the middle at 2.5 here in the non-title bout here. So only a 3-round fight, minus 235. We're expecting this one to go deep into the Phoenix night. Okay, for more on these bouts and how these lines are set, it's great to have Nick Kalikas back here on First Strike. And Nick, we caught up with you last week, and right here at Circa, you do set the lines here for combat sports. I'm always intrigued when you see what happened a week ago, and I want to get your thoughts, just some bookkeeping, if you will. How did you guys fare last week? I know I was on the wrong side of Mackenzie Dern. I took her to win by submission. She had a shot in that second round, didn't get it done, but the underdog Rodriguez cashed those tickets.
Well, I mean, we actually did very well because we had more action on Dern. As I stated on the show last week, I actually opened Rodriguez a little bit lower as far as the dog money goes. So I was trying to attract money on Dern. I knew that would be the public side, and we got it. In fact, it closed a lot higher than I anticipated it would. But it ended up working out when it was all said and done.
Also, there was a huge boxing match that we all saw last week right here in Las Vegas, of course. when you get the trilogy fight. You're going to get a lot of money coming in. I know Tyson Fury, it seemed like he was ticking down towards Deontay Wilder. How'd the books make out there?
We did great in that fight as well. I mean, because we did get a lot of public Wilder action. And that was one of the best boxing matches we've seen in a long time, especially a heavyweight division. Instant classic. I think it lived up to the hype, definitely lived up to the pay-per-view buys, right? So it was great. No
question about that. And I was surprised, again, very quickly to the boxing end here, because it's boxing, because it's a heavyweight championship of the world. And we'll talk about our UFC and Bellator fights here this weekend. But you know it's going to get a huge handle, right, on that. Were you seeing a lot of money, American money coming in, rooting? We tend to do that here in the United States, pull for our guy Wilder over the foreigner, if you will, in Tyson Fury.
Yeah, no doubt. There's always, I think, that angle and aspect of things, especially, because we have that country pride everywhere you go. So that's I think that takes place in any country, right? We just have that, like we said, pride. So we do get a lot of those wagers, especially if somebody's on the fence. It's a dog price, it's attractive, and he's the American. They're going to end up betting it.
That's the way it normally shakes out. Let's talk about this weekend's bout, and I alluded to it here earlier with Aspen Ladd against Norma Dumont here. It does feel like we're trying to find new opponents for the Lioness here in Amanda Nunes at 145 pounds. I think that's why Ladd has made this weight move here to get out of the 35-pound division. Plus, she was struggling to make weight. Let's be honest about that. Small favorite that you guys have so far here at Circa. Are you seeing any movement as we get closer and closer to fight night?
Yeah, again, it was, for me, I'd rather take action on the favorite here as well, because there's just a lot of question marks surrounding this. Of course, the move up in weight. And Dumont is one of those fighters that kind of flies under the radar as well. She's not the household name that you would expect. Like Aspen Ladd's a little bit more so in that regard, right? So for me, I think it's a very difficult fight, but we did get a lot of action coming in on Ladd for us. I mean, for us, we're riddled with sharps. I mean, that's the majority of our business. Mm-hmm. So when I say we have two-way sharp action, that's the case more times than not, right? So in this particular spot, we did get over the limit bets on the favorite Ladd. So we pushed that line up a little bit. We have to respect that action. So we're a little bit higher than the current market right now.
And it felt like that's what you guys had last week, right? When you go with a known commodity here, the public's going to back that a little bit more. And to your point here, Aspen Ladd might not be a household name yet, but I think more people know her in kind of the fringe casual circles of UFC than they do Norma Dumont. So again, plus money here for Dumont at plus 105. The over-under is intriguing to me here too, Nick, because I look at it and I see that, boy, under right now, juice to the under here at 4.5. So we're expecting this fight here to go long, if not the distance here. What type of action are you seeing so far in this?
We're getting bet over. I mean, a lot of action on the over. And again, that's why if you could look at our line right now, we're a little bit different. A lot of people are favoring the under. I actually think it is going to go under. I mean, both these ladies have enough firepower, and they tend to slow down as the fight progresses a little bit. So I think that sweet spot might be round 3, round 4, maybe into round 5, early round 5. So it's going to be close to that round total, I think, unless obviously Aspen Ladd gets it done early. I think that's the scenario there. But we are getting more action and more resistance on the over in comparison to the market right now.
Very quickly, and I know you guys don't put out your Bellator odds until fight day.
Right, morning up.
How do you here at Circa, how do you guys kind of judge those Bellator cards? Because again, you see like DraftKings has already got some lines out. Mm-hmm. Why do you guys wait till Saturday to do it? Is it just because you don't see the influx of action until fight day?
That's correct, and especially markets like this. For us, UFC trumps all. I mean, I think across the board for all sportsbooks, it's a different type of handle. It's a different type of popularity. I mean, the UFC is definitely the #1 organization. Now, Bellator is a great organization. They have a lot of talented fighters, but for us, the handle's just not there. So we would rather open it up on fight day with much bigger limits than the average sports book that goes out there and opens up a little bit earlier. There's two different marketing philosophies, I think. For us, we'd be willing to open up on fight day and take the bigger limits. The other philosophy with DraftKings, which is fine, I understand that as well, is getting the lines up a little bit earlier and taking that early action as well. So two different types of
And Nick, what time, can you give us an idea of what time they'll be posted here at Circa in case people want to hop over and see what those first lines are?
They'll be available by like 5, 6 a.m. Eastern normally. So they're up super early as we possibly can on fight day. We want to try to get, that action going for sure.
And again, I guess it's similar to what you have to do in the UFC, Nick, but you guys are pros. You're great at what you do. So when you see some of the lesser names on a Bellator card, do you find that that's harder to handicap?
For me, I think it's a little bit easier because I could dig, I think, a little bit deeper and better than most people in those type of situations in those cards that a lot of people might not recognize and they move on, so to speak, right? Yeah. So I think it's actually better and it gives us more of an advantage in that situation, right? But in Bellator, in comparison to the UFC, you see a lot more chalk, too. I mean, you see a lot of bigger favorites. The fights aren't typically as competitive, and so that's the thing. We have a lot more parlay action. Not necessarily as many straight bets coming in on Bellator cards. A lot of parlay action comes in.
What about the atmosphere here on a Circa Sportsbook night, on a Saturday night, when you have Bellator and you have UFC going? Can they watch both here?
Yes. Usually we can. I mean, we try to, position it. Maybe it might not be on the center
college
stage,
football
right?
going on as well. You got a lot of things going on.
Right. So college football is obviously going to trump everything, especially, mid-season or whatever. It's hot and heavy right now. So that's going to trump everything. But if we do have availability to put the Bellator card on, we will do that.
Okay.
Sure.
And very quickly, getting back to the main event at UFC Fight Night 195 here. Again, so early on, you guys are looking for Dumont. You're kind of hoping that the action goes on the favorite here. Do you expect that line to move before we actually get to Fight Night tomorrow night?
I think our line will probably drop a little bit. Again, we were lopsided right now. We're a little bit more heavy. I shouldn't say a little. We're a lot more heavy on Ladd right now, so we're waiting to get some Dumont bets back in just to be a little bit safer. I'm not going to go stick my neck out too far on this fight because, again, it's a competitive line. It should be a competitive fight, and I think both ladies do have a path to victory here. So you don't want to get totally lopsided here. You want to kind of a little bit of a smaller, more effective booking type of situation in this fight.
And what about a fighter like Andrei Orlovsky? Because I'm an old guy. I root for the old guy here. Not sure if I'm going to back him with my money here, but I see what you guys have done here at about minus 115, minus 1. Almost feels like a pick 'em fight here for Orlovsky and Felipe. I'm assuming the public's going to come in on Orlovsky?
Well, I mean, he's been so great. That's the thing. He, for me, is an outlier because his chin was much worse not long ago, right? It seems like he's getting better. I mean, he's still in great physical shape. They're using him kind of as a gatekeeper, meaning that if you get past Arlovsky, we'll get you in that upper tier of heavyweights, right? He's shutting the door on a lot of these prospects, man, and he's winning. So if you go to the scorecards with Arlovsky, you're probably going to lose a decision because the guy knows how to win on the cards. So I think Felipe's best chance is actually knocking him out, trying to keep it competitive. That's why you see a toss-up type of fight, because I think Felipe does have that kind of power that could catch Arlovsky. But it's kind of far and few in between lately.
Sometimes as you get older, you get more and more hard-headed. Nick Kalikas, really appreciate your insight. As always here, does a great job here of setting the lines at Circus Sportsbook. Come on back. Lou Finocchiaro is going to join us next. He was at the weigh-ins. We'll break it down when you come back with us. It's First Strike right here on VSiN. First Strike right here on VSiN. Of course, we've got a lot of action to get to. Get in on the Bellator 268 action for free with the Bellator MMA Prediction Challenge. Answer questions about how you think it's all going to go down on October 16th for your shot up to $5,000. Head to DraftKings.com/Showtime now to make your predictions before the fight begins. Who's going to be one step closer to claiming the light heavyweight throne? Well, don't miss the light heavyweight World Grand Prix semifinals on Saturday, October 16th, live on Showtime. Terms and conditions apply and other eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. Back here on First Strike, I am Dave Ross. It's always great to have the man himself, Lou Finocchiaro, join the program. Of course, you've got to listen to his podcast, Bout Business. Episode 5 drops this afternoon. Lou, it's great to have you back on the program. I always like it because when we get to catch up with you, when you're at the weigh-ins, and I know you get to glean a lot when you watch these fighters up close and in person. So I want to get your thoughts. Let's start off in the UFC, and let's start right at the top here with the main event. So when you look at Aspen Ladd moving up in weight now to 145 pounds, and Lou, you and I have talked about it in previous shows, she struggled to make weight here. Now at 45, had to be a much easier weight cut for her in this non-title fight, right?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, for Aspen Ladd, making 45 is going to be a breeze. The issue is she wants to fight at 35 so she can have size and advantage, but she can't make that weight. And segueing into that conversation is the fact that just 2 weeks ago, she missed weight at 135, was weak-kneed and wobbly on the scale, and now turns around 2 weeks later to take another fight, steps up in weight against a legitimate 145er who'll weigh 157, 160 in the cage by the time the opening bell goes off. So there's some unknown with Ladd and some advantage with Dumont.
When you look at this, Lou, here from a handicapping perspective, and I know you always try to find value. That's obviously something you can listen to in the About Business podcast. What value have you seen? Is it straight up on the challenger then? Because at plus money, do you like her odds here to just flat out get the win? As we saw this happen last week with the ladies when they took center stage, the dog cashed in that fight as well.
provided an investor is willing to overlook the unknown with Ladd, yes, Dumont would be the side, and that's where I would lean. That said, Ladd's a pretty ferocious wrestler, and if she could get Dumont to the ground, and that's a big if, then advantage perhaps sways. So there's so much unknown in this fight that I'm going to have to settle for a lean to Dumont, not necessarily a bet, because I just don't know what to expect from Aspen Ladd.
And here's the other thing, Lou, and we talked about it with Nick Kalikas earlier in the program. When you look at the over-under here, set at 4.5, right? So we're expecting this fight to go deep into the Las Vegas night here. What do you make of that number here? Because, again, it's juiced to the under at minus 130. Is there value in taking the over and assuming this fight's going to go all 5?
You know, Dave, as I think about it, no. I think the way I handicap this fight is that the questions I have with Ladd will be in regard to how she handles the move up in weight and what her cardio and capacity can be after training 6 weeks for a fight, then taking 2 weeks off and trying to ramp back up. I would lean to under here, whether Dumont's too big and wears her down, or more importantly, I think Aspen Ladd knows that she's got limited time and she may just come out there and throw the throttle way open and try and get it done. I would lean to under here, not over.
And Lou, that's a great point because, again, you mentioned at 135, she was dying on the scale there, right? So now all of a sudden, what's the cardio situation going to be for her at 145? I think it's a very astute observation. She might go for broke knowing that that gas tank will empty. We saw it last week with Mackenzie Dern trying to get that stoppage in the second round. She couldn't get it. And all of a sudden, she just held on. It goes to a decision that she ultimately lost. Let's talk about the co-main event here. And look, I'm an old guy, Lou, so I always root for the old guys here. And Andrei Orlovsky taking on the younger challenger. 42 to 26 is the age difference here when you look at Carlos Felipe. And basically a pick-em fight here. Which way would you pick them if you had to wager it?
Well, you know what, Dave? I'm an old guy, too, and they'd have to have one of the Gracies in for me to make a reference as far back as I go. But with regard to this fight, I think what you have here is a really great clash in styles. Carlos Felipe called out Arlovski, and we know from being a long-time UFC and mixed martial arts enthusiast that the Brazil-Russia rivalry, it's as real as the Dodgers and the Giants. I mean, these countries hate each other when it comes to fighting. Felipe is 16 years the younger man at 26, but he looks like a baker or a plumber physique-wise, but we can't get fooled by the physique because he has explosion, power, and as a kid he was bullied because he was obese. At 12, 13, he weighed 350. These kids bullied him in Brazil, and it gives him an unbelievable attitude, an aggressive, snarling disposition, and he wants to go out there and finish Orlovsky, who has been known to be chinny. That said, Arlovsky's going to be 5 inches the taller man. He's going to have 8 inches of reach advantage. He's got vast experience, and he's seen young Brazilians snarling at him before. So what we have to measure is the old man against the young man. And to me, Felipe has 8 minutes to really get this done, and if he can't get it done, I think if Arlovsky can navigate around in a minute, he's going to be in position to keep Felipe on the outside and maybe turn the bout his way.
It's fascinating contrast in styles. I can't believe we look at Andrei Orlovsky these days as the guy who's going to be the stick and move guy in the octagon and maybe play towards an over. And again, because he is a bit chinny or has been in the past, you always worry about the flash knockout here with a one-punch power of the Brazilian, but it's a very interesting style of fights. I do want to get to Bellator very quickly, Lou, and I want to pick your brain. When you look at Ryan Bader against Corey Alexander, of course, these are UFC vets that the UFC fight crowd knows very, very well. Again, talk about age here. Bader's getting up there. He's 38 years old. CO Alexander here so far looking good in Bellator, undefeated in his first 2 fights there. And he's the solid favorite here at DraftKings at minus 190. You know, I look at Bader, and I know he's an accomplished wrestler, but so is Anderson. Which side do you like here? Because at plus money, I feel like they're double dog daring me to take Bader.
Yeah, this fight opened much tighter line. The money's been coming in on Anderson. And yes, I will give Anderson a little edge in the wrestling. and I'll give him a little edge maybe in cardio and pressure. But all he's been doing this week is flapping his gums. I'm reading out of him tremendous overconfidence, or it's just to tell that he's nervous as he can be. Meanwhile, this morning at the weigh-ins, which I attended, I saw Vader, and I pulled him off to the side, and I said, "Hey, Ryan, can I ask you a favor?" He said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Would you shut this kid up?" And I believe Vader is going to do, in fact, that. And it's with power, because Corey's got a glass jaw. You sneeze on him, and he's going to go. And I think Vader's going to catch him.
Wow. Okay. I think I'm going to go to the window there and back Ryan Bader on that one. Again, it wasn't that long ago. We were talking about Ryan Bader against Daniel Cormier in the UFC in the light heavyweight division. I mean, that's how acclaimed Ryan Bader was before he left the UFC on a winning streak to go to Bellator and collect belts there. So we'll find out about that. The other fight in Bellator I do want to mention with you very quickly, it's Benson Smooth Henderson against Brent Primus here. What is your take on this? Because these are, Benson's a former UFC champ. Primus is a former Bellator champ. So it's kind of champ versus champ. Which way do you lean here?
Benson, a product and owner of the MMA lab that has spoon-fed me information for 20 years and made me the handicapper I am. So I can't get involved in any Benson Henderson fight just because I'm too close to him, but I will break it down like this. Primus is a monster. And as good as Benson is with his jiu-jitsu and on the floor, I don't think he wants to go there with Primus. I think Benson, if he keeps distance, keeps this on the feet, he is the most cerebral fighter you'll ever see because he is so mental. Primus is, he could hit a building and it'll fall down. So it's going to be guile against absolute grit. And I think Benson's in very good position here. I look for the fight to be a decision one way or the other, and where it takes place will tell you where it's going to be. If it's on the floor, Primus is going to have advantage, and if it's on the feet, Benson's going to have advantage.
Okay, I got about 1 minute left with a man you can follow on Twitter as I do, @GamBlue, of course, VSiN contributor Lou Finocchiaro. Lou, I'll give you any card. You have two cards, UFC and Bellator. Your best bet tomorrow night is what?
What I want to give you is a bet that I'm very, very confident that is mispriced, and it is on the Bellator card. And where we have to go, we have a couple of names here that I'm going to have to be forced to take a look at. So I have a Swedish fighter, Albrechtsen, who's facing a Ukrainian, Yagshimuradov. Albrechtsen is a favorite. Run, don't walk. Carl Albrechtsen.
Wow. That's why we love talking to Lou Finocchiaro. Of course, follow him on Twitter and listen to the Bout Business podcast. Lou, enjoy the fights. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks for having me, Dave, and good luck, everyone.
We are back right here on First Strike on VSiN. Going to break it down analytically with Reed Kuhn next. Back here at First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. Let's take a look ahead to some big-time matchups coming in the UFC. And how about this? October 30th at UFC 267, not one. We've got two title fights on display, and we already have some lines out for that. The Light Heavyweight Championship bout between Jan Blachowicz against Glover Teixeira. And right now, Polish Power and Blachowicz, a solid favorite at minus 265. Glover Teixeira. The guy's been climbing and climbing and climbing, always looking for that title shot. He gets it here, the comeback on the challenger, plus 215. And on the same night, interim bantamweight championship between Peter Yan and Corey Sanhagen. Very intriguing fight here. Of course, Yan, the striker, at minus 235. Sanhagen is no slouch on his feet, as we all know, but we'd probably like to get this fight down to the ground. Plus 190, of course, Aljamain Sterling is the champ. But right now, we are waiting for him to get ready to go again. So in the interim, we've got Peter Yan and Corey Sanhagen. Right now, let's break all things down with the UFC with Reed Kuhn, who does a great job as a handicapper and does it very systematically with an analytical style that I really appreciate. So let's take a look at some of your models here that you see so far, Reed. And let's start off, obviously, with the main event. When you look at Aspen Lad against Dumont here in this fight, Norma is the slight underdog at plus 105. What are the models suggesting to you?
Yeah, it is an interesting matchup for a few reasons. We've got weight cut issues. We've got people changing weight classes. But if we just look at this on paper, in terms of their performance, we probably will see a striking matchup. And if we do, Dumont actually has the better striking skills. And I'm specifically looking at offensive accuracy, overall pace, as well as defense, so strike avoidance. And she actually outperforms Aspen Ladd in all three of those categories. Aspen Ladd might have a power advantage. I don't think the sample size here is enough to really draw a conclusion. They've each scored one knockdown in their UFC fights so far. But thankfully, like the weight cutting and the shift in the weight class division for Aspen Ladd actually doesn't work against me picking an upset here. So it is a small lean, but I'm willing to go with Dumont for the upset, purely looking at performance metrics, how they match up, sort of ignoring the rest of it, but knowing also that it doesn't really work against me.
That's fascinating because I think Lou Finocchiaro, who we just had on in the last block here, both you guys suggest, because I was thinking the same thing. Oh, well, she's going up to 145. Now the weight cut shouldn't be an issue. Both you guys are not scared off of the underdog challenger here, getting that plus money on the comeback. So very intriguing the way your models and the way Lou looks at it similarly here. Let's talk about the over-under again. Certainly right now we're thinking that this fight's going to go long with the over set at 4.5 rounds here, plus 100, the under set to minus 130. What are the models indicated there? Should we expect this fight to go deep into that Vegas good night?
Yeah, I don't really have a model-driven prediction for over/under, not yet anyway. But,
okay.
I do see some power here, and you don't always see that. Here we are at women's featherweight. Ladd is not cutting the weight she normally does, so she should have a little bit of extra endurance, a little more weight behind those punches, and they do both swing pretty hard. So it's hard. I mean, 4.5 rounds is a long time to work. If it's going to come, it should come before that, or it could go to the distance. It depends if they start mixing in the ground game. That's a big question mark. If these two start clinching and spending long times on the fence, that's really going to draw this out. You don't normally knock people out just on the fence line. So I'm passing on the over/under. I see elements either way, but unless there's a big divergence in the line, I'm going to avoid that one.
All right, let's talk about Andrei Olofsky here because, Reed, I'm getting old here. I love watching the old guys fight. He's 42 years young, still getting it done, and getting a lot of respect here. Basically, a pick'em type fight here that we're seeing with Carlos Felipe coming in here as the Brazilian heavyweight. What are the models indicating here? Because I know people are thinking, oh, it's got to be a knockdown. You got Orlovsky in there. He's been more technical in his advancing age. What are the numbers showing to you?
Yeah, his defense appears to have somehow gotten better because he hasn't been knocked down as frequently. So when I look at the rate at which a fighter is knocked down, his was pretty bad a few years ago, and it's actually gotten better because basically he's taken more punches without being knocked down. So his metric has gone up. Now, also, his head strike defense is significantly better than Carlos Felipe, and the quality of the opponents that Arlovsky has faced is better than Felipe. They have similar strike accuracy, but Arlovsky is pretty game going in with pretty much anyone on the feet. And if he's not getting knocked out, he has a veteran's ability to win on the scorecards, maybe a close decision. So I am leaning, whether it's a pick'em or an upset for Arlovsky, I would maybe shop around, find some plus money. But I do see the potential here for Arlovsky, and that's ignoring the strength of schedule differences here. So just on performance metrics alone, I would go with Arlovsky for the upset, and you don't normally see me picking a guy who is 16 years older than his opponent and on the wrong side of 40, especially at heavyweight. So I'm as surprised as you are, but I would go with a slight lean on the underdog here.
Yeah, and again, his first professional fight was in 1999, and his first debut in the UFC was UFC 28. UFC 28, that was back in 2000. No, I did not cover that one. I do want to pick your brain very quickly on one other fight here in the undercard, and that's Julian Marquez against Jordan Wright. And what's fascinating about this is we feel like this fight's got to be stopped early, okay? Because when you look at Marquez, all 9 of his wins have come via finish. Both of his losses were via decision, and all 12 of Wright's wins are via finishes. His loss was via KO. So it's a bizarre way to look at this fight here analytically, and you break it down. Marquez a solid favorite at minus 255. What do you make of this undercard bout?
So if it goes off, because I'm hearing word that they may cancel this matchup because of a non-COVID related health issue with Julian Marquez, I was looking at this all week. This was actually going to be my strongest play, probably. Now, Marquez is the favorite, but I saw him as being a maybe underpriced favorite. I saw there still being value on the line. So if that fight goes off, I'm definitely on Marquez. I think he has much sharper skills And I do see a lot of finishing potential in that fight. This could get postponed to a later day. We don't know yet. But if it does, I'll probably have the same position.
Well, it's very interesting, too, when you look at here, because the combined record of Wright's first 6 opponents that he beat, combined 0-47. So to your point here, Marquez certainly has fought the better competition. Before we move along to the Bellator card, Reed, I want to get your thoughts. Are there any other fights on the undercard that your numbers tell you that the better could really get an advantage here?
It's some chalk, I'll admit. But Ramazan Ameev, I do have him as being a high probability win. Now, you're going to have to lay a lot of juice on that one. It's going to be expensive. But if you are piecing together parlays, Ameev is a solid bet. I basically see the odds as being pretty accurate here, but he is a high probability win. Now, the same would go probably for Ludovic Klein, the Slovakian fighter. We have a Slovak member of the household here, so she gets pretty excited whenever he fights. She used to train with him back home. He is a very strong striker, and he lost his last outing because he got basically pinned on the mat. And Nate Landwehr is not going to do that. He's going to go toe-to-toe with him, and he's been knocked out a few times. So I think Klein by knockout or simply that the fight doesn't go the distance is a decent value play there. So those are both undercard bets that I'm looking at, and maybe Brandon Davis is a small upset play that I see a little bit of potential on. I'll probably sprinkle on that underdog.
All right, talking with Reed Kuhn here. Got a couple minutes left. Reed, let's switch gears and get over to Bellator. And before we actually break down with what your numbers see, is it harder for you as a professional capper to do that with Bellator? I just wonder about sample size here, or do you have enough data that you can feel like you're comfortable in what the numbers tell you?
Yeah, I actually don't have the same data for pure Bellator fighters, but in this case, we do have a matchup of 2 UFC guys with a lot of data who both went over. And when that big migration first occurred from the UFC into Bellator, I actually was trying to do some of those matchups and look at if we were using UFC performance data and then matching them up. It actually played out pretty well. So it was a pretty strong predictive analytics there. Now that they've been out a while, that data gets old. So what we can do is actually kind of go in a time machine back in time and say, what if these two were to match up 3 years ago, 4 years ago? And with Ryan Bader and Corey Anderson, we have 2 guys who, they didn't get pushed out of the UFC. They both left in pretty good standing. They were highly rated guys fighting title caliber opponents, and they both went to the Bellator. So that is a matchup that I am interested in seeing. I would have probably leaned Ryan Bader if I had not looked at the numbers. The simulation comes out a little bit in favor of Anderson, but he also is the favorite here. And so it's basically a no play in terms of the prediction outcome. But you got to note that Anderson can be hit. He's been dropped 5 times. He's only scored 1 knockdown himself. He's been dropped 5 times. Bader does have abnormally good power, and he maintained the very high knockdown rate all throughout his UFC career. So if I were to sprinkle on a prop bet, it would be Bader by knockout. You might get north of plus 300, maybe even plus 350 on that. So that's interesting to me. Yeah, I'm probably going to avoid the side, though. But if Bader wins, it's probably by knockout. I don't think he's going to be the busier fighter here. If Anderson is staying clear of that big bomb, he's probably doing the pressure striking. He might even be clinching and putting it on the ground. So Anderson by decision, but Bader has more knockdown potential.
Absolutely fascinating with these fights, and a great point. Both these guys were in very good standing in the UFC before they went to Bellator. Should be a great Saturday night. Reed, appreciate the time and the information, my friend. Thanks for joining us here on First Strike. When we come back, Jordan Sherwood's going to join the program as well. We are back at his First Strike right here on VSiN. Back here on First Strike on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross, and again, want to give you a programming update, of course, on November 6th at UFC 268. 2 incredible title fights that we'll be breaking down in the coming weeks here. Welterweight title bout between Kamaru Usman in the rematch against Colby Covington. Right now, the challenger, Colby, is getting plus 230. Usman, right now, may be regarded pound for pound as the very best in the world. is minus 290 on that same night. Women's strawweight title bout between Rose Namajunas against Zhang Weili, also in a rematch. Of course, Rose won the belt from Weili. Now the challenger here is plus 100. Rose is the champion, a small favorite at minus 110. So again, in the coming weeks, we'll break down those fights in greater detail. But right now, Jordan Sherwood joins the program here, another professional handicapper in mixed martial arts. And Jordan, let's talk about some of these smaller fights here on the undercard of UFC Fight Night 195. Start off with Bruno Silva against Andrew Sanchez. What are you seeing and what's your lean in this one?
Yeah, I mean, and pleasure to talk to you, Dave. I mean, my lean is going to be Bruno Silva. And the reason being is because we've seen him have strong takedown defense and unbelievable power. And that is a formula, a recipe if you're going to beat Andrew Sanchez. Andrew Sanchez, when he came to the UFC, when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, he relied on his grappling, he relied on his wrestling. And at some point in his UFC career, he fell in love with his striking and kind of just gave up on that. And that's been a bad formula for him because he's been stopped in two of his last three fights. His chin is somewhat suspect. So for me, when you're handicapping this fight, you lean Bruno Silva because of his takedown defense, because of the fact that he has knockout power. And Andrew Sanchez, for me, his chin is basically wiped out. Now, granted, we could see Sanchez use his grappling, go back to that. He did switch up training camps. He's at American Kickboxing Academy for this go-around, but I don't buy it. I think there's value even at $1.70. So my lean and play will be Bruno Silva, and likely a finish as well. So if you don't even like the $1.70, you want a little bit more juice, inside the distance for Silva would also be my recommendation.
Jordan, I'm right there with you. Sometimes I look at these fighters and I go, if your name is not John Jones, stop trying to beat guys at what you don't do the best. And Andrew Sanchez, a striker? No, that's not the way we think of him in the UFC. I think that's a great take there. Let's talk about Dana Batragal against Brandon Davis. What are you seeing here that you might like?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at the combination of both guys where, Brandon Davis, second time around in the UFC, this has just always been a tough out, a guy that's, not great anywhere, but well-rounded enough to hang a little bit in the UFC, but I don't think he's a guy to get stopped. But I wouldn't recommend him as a play. I just think the fight is in the over. Neither guy really a finisher in my mind, and I think Brandon Davis enough to keep this fight, on the feet, keep this fight going towards the judges' scorecards, but I think he is on the short end of the stick, and that's why if any play I have for this fight, it would be on the over at 2.5. Okay,
obviously I have an affinity for the old guys here, Jordan, and obviously when you have Andrei Orlovsky in a card, I'll be rooting for him at 42. But Jim Miller, get that hokey high from Virginia Tech, still going these days, taking on Erick Gonzalez, so it's always going to be an old guy against a young guy here. What's your take in this fight? I wonder how many more Jim Miller still has left in him.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the stat that I think Jim Miller, and he's had obviously he's a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind, a long-standing UFC career. I think he's 7-1 in his UFC career when he's been a $2 favorite or more. That's what he is against Gonzalez today. I mean, in his previous 4 fights, where Jim Miller, I believe, is 1-3. He cashed as the dog one time. Actually, the biggest time he was an underdog against Roosevelt Roberts at plus 230. He cashed. The other 3 times he lost. I think he should be a favorite. I think he's got advantages everywhere against Gonzalez, but there's not enough value for me to trust Jim Miller at that age, and against a guy in Gonzalez who hits hard, to be a little bit reckless at times. So I have to find value for me in Jim Miller. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's an outstanding submission artist. I think looking for him on the prop via submission, and I think there's some places where you can get it at plus $2, maybe higher than that. I mean, look, Gonzalez is a guy that maybe because of his reckless nature, he swings and misses. Jim Miller snatches an arm, snatches onto that neck, gets the submission victory. So not enough confidence in me to trust Jim Miller, even though he should win this fight. So grab some value as a prop, via submission. That's where I like Jim Miller's hand to be raised tomorrow.
I think it's a great handicap because, again, you're right, DK. You can get it for Miller by submission at plus 240. And if you think Gonzalez can at least get a knockout here, and those kind of feel like the pathways to victory, plus 500. So maybe there's some real value there depending on how you think the fight script's going to go. But I'm with you, Jim Miller. I don't like laying that big over $2 price. So, again, at DraftKings right now, plus 240 if you think Miller can snatch in and uses Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to get a victory on the ground inside the distance. Let's stay on the UFC very quickly here, Jordan. And I do want to get to the main event here, obviously with Norma Dumont against Aspen Ladd. We talked a lot about Ladd not being able to make weight at 135, moving up to 145 for this non-title fight here. What do you make of this? Because there's two theories, right? Now that she's at 45, it's not a weight cut issue, so her gas tank should be there. But when I talk to the experts, they still feel like that could be a problem for her in this main event. What do you make of it?
Yeah, this is a laundry list of issues that I have with siding with Aspen Ladd. And look, I was actually siding with Macy Chasson a week ago when, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, the timeline when Aspen Ladd couldn't make weight, and that fight was scrapped because she was coming off a long layoff. She was coming off a reconstructive knee surgery. So now with this fight, she misses weight. She flies back home. Then she's asked to fly back to Vegas and fight at a weight class that she's never fought at before. And typically, when you're changing weight classes, you like a little bit of time to have your body adjust, put on some extra muscle. And granted, she made weight fine, earlier today. But she's taking on an outstanding striker, not a natural 145er. Norma Dumont used to fight at Bantamweight herself, but she's now fought at featherweight. She looked good against Felicia Spencer, a person that looks to take the fight to the ground. I think she kept the fight on her feet for at least 2.5 rounds. Maybe there was a leg takedown for Felicia Spencer. That's Aspen Ladd's game, is the takedowns. Plus the fact now this is a 5-round fight. I think Norma Dumont either is going to get her out of there quickly with the striking, or have enough in the gas tank, enough of the cardio at 145 to frustrate Aspen Ladd. Ladd's going to gas, and that's why at plus money, Norma Dumont is my play. There's just too many factors going up against Aspen Ladd. The long layoff, the changing in weight, the travel, that I'm going to trust her to get her hand raised tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's so funny because she feels like she's been vilified a little bit here in the MMA circles. I heard Miesha Tate, the former champion at 135, said, hey, look, I don't dislike Aspen Ladd. We just want her to make weight and show up and fight when she's supposed to be scheduled to fight. So it looks like this is going to go on tomorrow night in her new weight class at 145. And you got to think whoever wins this fight here, Jordan, is probably going to get a shot at the lioness herself, Amanda Nunes. Let's go over to Bellator very quickly in our finishing minutes here with Jordan Sherwood. And Jordan, when you look at Ryan Bader against Corey Alexander here, look, I got to be honest, I was surprised to see that Bader was such a big underdog, at least in my eyes, to Corey Alexander, who's undefeated in his young Bellator career at 2-0 so far, against a guy in Bader who back in the day in the UFC, we were talking about him fighting possibly Daniel Cormier for the light heavyweight championship. What do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I'm surprised by it as well. I more handicapped this as a pick'em. So at plus money, I'm gonna grab Ryan Bader. I think that the wrestling cancels each other out. They're both, obviously well-schooled collegiate wrestlers. They're well-schooled mixed martial arts wrestlers. Bader's got more power. Maybe there's a little bit more versatility in the striking, athleticism in the striking with Corey Anderson. But at the end of the day, for me, I just think Ryan Bader's been in there with better customers. We've seen Corey Anderson's chin, get questioned. Jan Blachowicz knocked him out, I think, in his last fight in the UFC. And I'm going to trust that right hand of Ryan Bader. I mean, look, anybody's going to look terrible against Vadim Nemkov, the Bellator light heavyweight champion. I think he's the real deal and probably could compete with some of the better fighters in the UFC. So, I think, short history on Ryan Bader. People are going to be fading him. I don't buy it. I'm going to take him at plus money, especially as the underdog. And I think he's got enough in the skill set. This is probably going to the judges' scorecards, and I'll think he wins a decision against Corey Anderson tomorrow. I
think Corey Anderson still goes by 24/7. So if that's the case, maybe this fight will go all 5 rounds in this one. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and pay attention to it. Jordan Sherwood, really appreciate the time and the information here on First Strike. Enjoy the fights. Boy, we get a bonanza here with Bellator and the UFC this weekend. So appreciate the time.
Yeah, not often we get a better Bellator card, but we got it. But anyway, more MMA is fine for me.
Yeah, we've got no problems with that whatsoever. No qualms whatsoever about that. Jordan, appreciate the time for joining us here today. And again, before we go here on First Strike, I mentioned last week our producer, Britton Hess, he gave us his best bet. And he cashed it. It was a 3-way parlay a week ago, so I'd be remiss if I didn't give out Britton's best bet. Again, this week he's going to go with Brandon Davis, the plus money here at plus 135 against Badgergall to go ahead and cash that ticket. We'll see if Britton can go 2-0 as well so far, and his early debut right here on First Strike. Thanks for watching First Strike right here on VSiN. Again, enjoy all the fights on the UFC and Bellator, and we'll see you next week.